it's almost like an investigator that you're like, oh, found another thing under the hood. Thank you so much, pattern. Thank you so much, brain, for bringing this to the forefront. I don't need this anymore. Okay, cool. Let's process it out and let's dump it.
Welcome to another episode of Hello Me, Unapologetically Authentic, with your hosts Christine Siona and Michelle Lyle. And today we are excited to introduce you to our next guest. Stay tuned and enjoy.
I'm so excited for our next guest. It's actually been almost a year since I met your beautiful face in a Zoom. Maybe January-ish was my first encounter with your lovely face last year.
Yes.
And now we get to meet again. I want to introduce the world to you briefly, Miss Cate, and you can definitely introduce yourself because you know you way more than anybody else. So this is Cate Christine. You live now, I hope I'm not butchering this, but I think you live in California.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yes.
Very good. And I know that's a giant place and a big state, but yay for me for remembering where that was. And you have many gifts and skills and capacities, but I know what excites me is we were, messaging and putting out a little post saying, hey, we're looking for guests on our Hello Me Unapologetically You podcast. And it seemed to light you up and you were really excited. And so tell me a little bit about what excited you to say yes to this invitation, and tell people a little bit about where you are in the world and what you're up to.
Well, first of all, I just really enjoyed when I did meet with you before. And I was like, oh, that was so much fun. It just, when it just kind of delights your body, you're like, oh, that feels really good. Let's do more of that. Yes, please. Let's have some more of that. And so I thought, oh my gosh, of course, yes. And so for me, what am I doing in the world? I will say this, I teach Silva Method. And so I teach through silvamethodwest.com. And I love it because it teaches us how to use our brain in a different way so that we access the alpha brainwave state. And then we can use that mindset literally with everything in life. So we can use it professionally, we can use it personally, we can use it to literally bring to us what we actually desire or dump what we don't want. And so it's really about using our brain in a different way that a lot of people don't even think is a possibility. I'm like, oh, no. Just most people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, very true. Well, and the brain, I mean, if I think about my brain, I can and do we even want to go there talking about my brain? But if I think about my brain, often my brain spins me into really interesting conversations with itself. And some of them are awesome, brilliant, and beautiful.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't know about you, but sometimes I've got a giant plethora of tools from my trainings and my life and my living and all of that. And then I kind of have the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, Michelle and I were on a call yesterday when the world kind of dumped on her lap some circumstances, and we have all these tools, and yet how quickly we forget because it's family or it's happening in my house or it's emotionally connected to me. So we're also gearing up to the end of the year. How have you and your brain been in 2023?
I will say 2023, there's been lots of challenges, but the key thing is I do meditate. So with Silva, we teach you how to meditate. There's lots of different types of meditation. I'm actually trained as a yoga therapist. I'm trained as a shaman, a curandera. I'm trained in a bunch of things, access. And it's what I've learned is how to use my brain in a different way. So when it happens to all of us, I don't care who you are, if all of a sudden you're going along, you're like, I'm doing awesome. And then you're smacked upside the head and you're like, wait, what just happened? And you're like, ugh. And then it's like, okay, let me take a deep breath in and let me just release. Let's get down into the alpha brainwave state. It's a slower cycles per second in the brain. And then as such, when you go into the slower cycles per second in the brain, you go into meditation. And so basically what happens is everything kind of lowers and then all the barriers lower, and you have access to more information. You have more awareness available because you're not operating in that beta brainwave state where it's like, go, 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 do, be. You're like, let me just be. Okay, let's look at this. Is this something to really respond to, or can I just let that sit for a moment? Okay, let me just let that sit for a moment. Okay, I can see that energy here. I can see that situation. And then when you get there, then it's like, okay, well, what's the best next thing to do? Is there something to do for this? And sometimes it's like, okay, you'll be able to, your clairvoyance increases as you go in and you do the different tools that they use, you receive more information. And then as such, you can ask, one of my favorite questions to ask is, what's my next best step? And sometimes your next best step is to just sit, just be. Sometimes another best step is like, here's a synchronicity, go follow that. And so I have had some amazing experiences and some really magical things happen where people are like, how in the world did you do that? And I'm like, I went into the alpha brainwave state, and then I went from there, and then I got such clear direction. I just followed it. And it was like, oh, super easy peasy. Like I just showed up. And so it's really fascinating to me because it can be that easy, but it's a matter of using what we have. Yes, we all have tools, but also using your brain in a way that it can help us in what we choose to do and what we choose to create and how we choose to show up.
My curiosity is, what was life like before you started this work, and what's life like now for you on a personal level?
On a personal level, the reaction has gone down because when something happens, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm able to let it like be out there and kind of observe it. And then I can go into the alpha brainwave state and it's like, what's underneath this? What's behind this? Is there some other information I need to know? So I had a weird thing happen earlier this week, and I was like, well, that's really interesting. Whereas in the past, I would have gotten really angry and been like, what? And then I was like, that's interesting. Okay, what's behind that? And I went into the alpha brainwave state and I could see the energy that was pushing this person to do that. And the person didn't even own it. It's just they invited, and people invite different things into their body and being based upon how they're reacting to situations or what they're inputting into their system. So if they're choosing to do certain drugs or too much alcohol, or they love to do the rage thing, they are inviting other beings without bodies into their body. And then when you have other beings without bodies into your body, sometimes you're not going to respond in the healthiest of manners because you're not a sovereign being anymore at that point. You have something else controlling you. And so that's really interesting because when all of a sudden I see stuff like that, I'm like, oh, as opposed to I'm like, what the hell? Like, excuse my language, but it's like what the what? And now I'm like, oh, okay. Well, let me look at that. Let me get into the alpha state. Oh, I can see what's around them. Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense why they would react in that way. That's interesting. But that doesn't mean I have to receive that. It doesn't mean I have to do anything with it. It doesn't mean I have to put it on and carry it and be like, oh, that's my thing. No, that's their thing. We're going to just let that be over there.
Mm-hmm. So I am curious, like I'm getting a sense of, oh my gosh. So what's popping in my mind is gearing up for like when situations are happening live and real and raw in the kitchen with family. And we're gearing up to the holidays, or people are about like just finished celebrating New Year's, depending on what time they're going to be listening to this. And I get it that our brain is this powerful thing. And I get it. I've had moments where it's like, oh, I know there was me before these tools, and then there's me after these tools.
Totally.
So I get that. And not no one is me. No one is me. I'm the only me.
Yeah.
You're the only you. Michelle's the only Michelle. And then we put me and you and him and Bob and Sheila and Sally and Tony and Betty at a Tupperware party or wherever, whatever we're doing. And so when we are, you know, living right now in the moment, and you can feel the molecules are shifting, you get this sense that something's off with someone. And yes, you've got all these skills and tools. Do you go like into the the alpha state at that moment? Or are you like here and you've got other questions that you're asking while you're not going up to the seventh plane?
Thing is, I practice meditation. I do it 2 to 3 times a day, and I've been doing it 2 to 3 times. So you get so good at it that it's like you don't have to close your eyes and go into the thing. You can be right there in the moment and you see this stuff. And one of the things that I love about the Silva method, you know, if someone's wanting to increase their clairvoyance, literally after our 4-day intensive, and I teach a 4-day intensive online, I've had people be like, that's not even possible. And I said, this is proven. It is evidence-based. It has been around since 1944. And then when they come through and then they learn how to remotely heal and they can do it and they're like, what the? You were not kidding. I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. It's proven, it's evidence-based. And so as such, you go through it, your clairvoyance increases. The more you continue to practice, your clairvoyance increases, but not just your clairvoyance, all of your clairs increase. So your spidey senses increase overall. So, I mean, literally, I was sitting in this work meeting and I'm sitting there, eyes wide open, and I'm like, and I was receiving the information that they were not saying. And it's interesting because one of my students took the 4-day, 2 days later, went back to work and said, called me up after 2 days and was like, Cate, you did not tell me I would hear my coworkers' thoughts. You did not tell me this. And I'm like, well, because it depends on every person. It depends on their abilities. And so she had a very similar experience to mine, where she sat in this meeting and she was like, I knew he was like, get me out of this meeting. The other person was like, what in the world am I going to make for dinner? The other person was like, okay, I want them to choose my path. I want them to choose my PowerPoint. Mine is the best. The other person is like, is this almost done yet? And then the other person in the meeting was like, okay, let's choose my path instead. So, and she was like, I was sitting there and I'm like, I can hear all their thoughts. What am I going to choose? And I said, well, that's really great information because it's not bad or wrong. It's not right or good. It is just information. So then you could see and ask appropriate questions to say, oh, well, tell me more about what you're proposing. And you tell me more about what you're proposing. Okay, now let's come together as a team. And how do we want to vote on it? And so the thing is, you can use these different things as you're starting to use your brain and your abilities, because you can teach intuition, and Silva method does teach it, and it's tried and true and proven and evidence-based. You can use it in every aspect. So we had talked about for her what to do, and I said, this is how I've used it at my job. And this has been so helpful because sometimes you're like, ooh, you can feel the energy of someone. You know that they got in a fight with their spouse, and then they show up and they're like, I'm fine. And you're like, I don't know about that. And so it's helpful information to help you. And one of the things that I love about Silva is that it's may the best for all involved occur. You're never going to send ill will towards someone else. If you're going to do that, that's not Silva, that's something else. You know, you can talk about CIA, FBI, blah, blah, blah. And ironically, this was the funniest part. So this has been around for a long time. It's been around since 1944. Well, the CIA knew what Silva was doing, and so he was teaching people how to access their intuition, because at the time they said, no, you're either born with it or you're not. And he said, no, you can teach it. And he had done so many different studies. He started out with his kids, started doing it. Then all the neighborhood kids wanted to come because they're like, oh my gosh, they're doing well at school. I want to do this too. And he started expanding and more and more. And then the CIA tried to shut him down. And so the difference was, he's like, no, may the best for all involved occur. It is all about everyone winning, because what Christine wants versus Michelle versus Cate, it's all different, but we can all have abundance. We can all win. But if you're going to do ill will, it's not going to work. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm curious about, I mean, when we created this podcast for Unapologetically Authentic, it's finding these people, like these golden nuggets like yourself, who are unabashedly themselves. And so I'm curious if you have any stories to share that would, invite and inspire people that are, because what you're talking about is you've got a different set of skills. You've got
Oh yeah.
you've got a different set of tools that is an inner, we all have these inner tools and capacities. You've got these inner little golden.
And just not everyone has tapped into them because they don't even know it's a possibility.
For sure. For sure. So you being this unapologetically you, authentic you, how are you challenged to, like, when do you find yourself not authentically being yourself?
Well, I
Is
think
there
it's
circumstances
really
where that,
helpful because once you become aware and then you're like, okay, because this is something that I've looked at. When I haven't felt safe in the past, I've reached for food and I realized, what am I doing? Am I actually hungry? It was like, no, what is this? Okay, that there's something under the hood. And I tell this to my students and my clients that it's like, hey, if there's something like that coming up, there's a pattern, there's something under the hood to go look at. And so you can start shifting it and changing it. And you said, okay, do you have any stories to share? Yeah, I have several. So I'm trained in rapid eye as well. I'm trained in essentially, if someone has trauma in the brain or the body and they'd like to remove it, I know how to do it. So I had served on 2 state committees for the state of Utah to help victims of violent crimes and sexual crimes. Then I served on 2 nonprofit boards to help victims of sexual violence. So a lot of times sexual violence in childhood or sexual violence from religious leaders. And so a lot of people are like, you can't heal from that. I'm like, that's bogus. Because here's the thing, when someone goes through any type of abuse, there's a subconscious program that starts running in the background of the brain. Our brain's job is to keep us alive. That is our brain's job. So sometimes the brain will then split if the abuse is so egregious and the body can't handle it. That doesn't mean this is a bad person or like something's majorly wrong. It's literally the brain was like, too much overload, can't handle. And so it's like, I'm going to split, I'm going to split, I'm going to split. So with people who have multiple personality disorder, I was like, they call it a disorder. I call it your brain was doing everything it could to keep you alive. And so when it splits, there was so much trauma. There was such an egregious nature of it that it was like, we got to keep your body alive. And this is the only way we know how to do it. However, you can reintegrate the personalities and you can become whole and healed because guess what? Those are just programs that are running in the subconscious, in the brain, in the body, and you just deprogram it and reprogram it. And so there's a lot of things that we've put really like horrendous titles and identifiers and labels. And I'm like, actually, it's a lot easier than that. And it can be kind of fun. And that's the part that I was working with someone earlier this week and they're like, you're making this like kind of happy. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of needs to be, because if you look at it this way, the brain's job is to keep you alive. Your brain was like, oh my gosh, I got to keep you alive. We're going to do this. You know what you need to do? You need to pat yourself on the back and be like, thank you so much, brain, for doing your job. You did an awesome job when I was a kid, but in the here and now, we don't have to still keep running those programs. So we're going to delete, dissolve, and get rid of those. And so we'll use different techniques, specifically with rapid eye, to remove them and then delete them and then reprogram the brain for what the person actually does want. And so then it becomes more fun. It's almost like an investigator that you're like, oh, found another thing under the hood. Thank you so much, pattern. Thank you so much, brain, for bringing this to the forefront. I don't need this anymore. Okay, cool. Let's process it out and let's dump it. Now, what would I rather have instead? Oh, I'd rather have this. All right, let's put it in. And so it can be fun and enjoyable to actually do your healing work because, we all got stuff under the hood. I mean, I don't know the stats for Canada, but I can say this specifically for America. When I served on those committees for the state of Utah, 98% of Americans grow up in dysfunctional homes. And that goes back to the ACE study. So that goes back to the 70s. And it's like, it's not good. But that doesn't mean you need to identify and label with it. You can say, hey, what would be more fun? What would feel better? And how can I do this? And so you ask for a story. So I'll just say I do have a corporate job and I do Silva. And at my corporate job, like I'm an advanced sound healer. Like I'm literally trained in over 50 modalities. I've taken close to 1,000 and I continue to learn. So my colleague had plastic surgery and there was a big yucky yuck. So she calls me up. I had to go fly out to headquarters and she's like, you know how you have that stuff. And I was like, what stuff? And she's like, those tuning forks. You said that it helps heal things faster. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And she's like, I had plastic surgery on my face and I'm really concerned about it and it doesn't look awesome. I'm like, oh, tuning forks. I'll show you how to use them. So I was there for a week and I said, this is how you do it. This is what you want to do. This is how frequent. And literally what was supposed to take 6 weeks took 2 days. And she was like, it's like it didn't even happen. I'm like, yeah, that's the magic. And so there's lots of things like that. Another story, another colleague, a friend's husband called me and said, Kate, my dogs ate chocolate. They ate the whole bag of chocolate. Can you do your thing? And I was like, okay, give me a second. Let me hop in and let's see what's going on. And I checked out both dogs and I moved the energy. And I said, you want to take him out like now, not in 5 minutes now, because otherwise it's going to be all over your kitchen floor. So he did. And then let me know like, oh yeah, it all came out in the grass. I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, it's a matter of using the different tools because it's all about for the betterment, not only of yourself, but for others and your animals and your loved ones. And that's why it's so fun because it's like, well, life can be better. So let's just create it. So yes, from a corporate standpoint, a lot of people know, and then they're like, all right, can you do your good thing? Like I get, and they make it sound like I'm like selling drugs or something. I'm like, it's just like tools. You know what I mean?
I love these stories and I have this is just like, I'm on the edge of my seat with this question. So you're saying words that I resonate with. I don't know the Silva method, but I know a lot about it a lot. And I'm very, very, very intuitive. And so you're saying words like beings without bodies and, you just do this and tuning forks, alpha brain waves. You are so grounded and confident in your language and how you speak about what you know, which is so fun for me because I'm like, yeah, someone speaking my language. In the regular real world where people can't see the unseen and they don't know all these other tools exist, how do you stay true to yourself and authentic with all of this brilliance and not want to hide or shut it down because somebody may not get it or think that you're weird?
I don't really care what other people think because I already know it works. And it's, I remember going to headquarters during the pandemic and I walked in the building and I thought, my gosh, why do I feel like I want to kill myself? And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's not even mine. But I was picking up on the energy of other people and this fear, this huge fear. And so, I mean, it's stuff like that. I'll incorporate it into things. And I mean, people know me at work. They know that I'm like, oh my gosh, like we had a meeting yesterday and I said, and we were waiting for one person to come and they came and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here for the party. And then they're like, Kate, what party? I'm like, the party we're going to have right now, because we're going to make this decision. That's going to be fun, fast, and easy. And literally we do because I intend it and I create it. So did we finish that meeting fast? Yeah, in 5 minutes. And so it's just part of like, this is who I am. So when you said, unapologetically, like unabashedly, like this is who I am. This is how I show up. There are some people who don't like me. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. And that's totally fine because I'm like, I was engaged to be married to a guy who was like, I got to tell you the funniest story. One of the most powerful negative manifestors you could possibly meet. And I was like, if we could just tweak that to positive, like it would be awesome. Because I remember 3 days in a row, I was living with him and he said, today's going to be a crap of a day, blah, 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 blah. And, he used the swear word. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, that's a bummer. So then what happened that night? He stepped in dog poop. And what did he do? He dragged it in the house. So next morning, Same thing. Blah, 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 rah, 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 then rah, rah, rah. And then it's going to be a poop of the day. What do? He sticked in dog poop. And what did he bring in the house? Dog poop. And I was like, you doing okay? Like, where, third day, same story, rah, 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 hey, blah, 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 blah. Goes out, it's going to be a poop of a day. Guess what he dragged in? Just guess.
Poop. I love it.
Exactly. And so I said, okay, I'm going to.
Here's a dog bag for you.
Yeah, exactly. I said, I'm going to make dinner and then we're going to sit down and have it. And I'd like to chat with you about a couple things. And so I did. We had dinner because I just thought he's on one. And then I said, you are a very powerful manifestor for exactly what you don't want. And if we just tweak things, you could create what you do want. And this was the major change for me of why I was like, this will never work and I need to leave. Who would he be without that? Because that was his identity. That is what his mom did. That is what his dad did. That is what his family did. And I said, that's a choice. Because going back to that statistic, 98% of Americans grow up in dysfunctional homes. Just because you were taught dysfunction doesn't mean does not mean you have to choose dysfunction, and does not mean you have to continue the patterns. We always have choice. Like literally, I have a choice of, hey, I'm gonna have some of my tea or not. Or hey, we always have a choice. And so people who think that they don't have a choice, I'm like, what's going on under the hood there? You got some serious programs running. And there's an opportunity to say, do I want this program running anymore? Or do I want to change it out? Maybe I want to take that program out. And maybe I want to put in the program of, I get to choose and I live in a free choice universe, you know? So that was so powerful for me because I was like, oh no, I am not, no. I want to be with someone that we can create and co-create together what we actually desire and have the best time ever. Because how much fun would that be?
I'm in. Same over here,
Yeah.
same over here.
Okay, and it's the same thing, like even with friends, and I'm like, hey, what do you want to create together? And we will co-create some of the most fun things. And so it's like, ooh, more please, let's keep doing more of this. And that's what I think is part of the joy of this life. It's a matter of you get to choose. And just because someone hands you some yucky stuff doesn't mean you got to be like, oh, I got to pick it up. I got to hold it. Got to love it. I got to put it. No, you say, well, I don't receive it. I'm putting it down. No, thank you. I don't accept that. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I love the playfulness. Like I often talk about the power of play. It's one of my core values, and curiosity as well. And as you're speaking, I mean, even from the moment we hopped on, there's this like, like I am singing my vibe. I am vibing my tribe. I am talking what I am walking. And that's the piece for me is when we are our vibrational awareness, it's like these little, I call them choice point moments, when we tap into that energetic identity of ourselves that really resonates. And it just takes that that one step.
Yeah.
And it was so long ago. I mean, now you're just like, la, 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 la. And it's been so long ago, we almost can, like, you're a potent, beautiful Merlot, and it's been just having its Merlot-ness for so long that sometimes we forget. Like even myself, if I was asked that same question of like, well, what was that like before you were just you?
Yeah.
And I was always a version of me. Like even I will meet people that knew me when I was, in junior high and high school. I'm like, oh, you're still Siona. And I was like, really? Like, because I was, but I'm now a way fuller, juicier version of that with way less of the hesitation, way less of the reservation, way less of the what they think matters. And so it's almost like with time and commitment, from what I'm hearing from you, with time and commitment to those things that are kind of our core truths,
Yeah.
as we figure those out, with time and commitment to being with and relating with these core truths of ourselves, everything else melts off.
Yeah.
And it's not, how do I stop doing that? It's like, actually, I'm just going to lean more into that energetic resonance of truth for me. And then the stuff just flicks off. And then you are just going, hi, I'm here. What do you want to talk about? And it just is.
Yeah.
And so then, for people who are curious and like, all right, well, I want some of that. Like, how do I do that? As I'm snarfing, the extra stuffing at Christmas or whatever, and wanting to kill my step cousin's lizard, like whatever that is. For me, it's that invitation to lean into that yum that you're talking about. And it's that commitment, as I'm hearing from you, it's like you've made a commitment to learning over your life. You made this commitment to slowly taste these other modalities. And as that curiosity of tasting these other things, you find what is energetically resonating with something in you that can be greater because it's now awakened. And so that curiosity, I think, if what would your life be like if you didn't have some sort of little that led you to all these thousands of different modalities?
I really sad. I think it'd be really sad. I mean, I grew up in a very strict religion that I left. And I was like, oh, that does not work for me. And it became quite obvious because it was all about control and imposing these rules and laws, God's laws. But I was like, well, that's really funny because you're an old white dude. Who's to say, I can talk to him too. We can all have a direct connection, because if you go into the history of it. So I found that was so fascinating because when you look back, the religious programming, whoa. And that's across the world. It's not just like, oh, just in North America or South America. No, it's worldwide. And it depends on the religion of the area. And then the part that's so fascinating, when you have programming, then you have judgments that go hand in hand. And so then as such, all that does is create separation. Whereas I don't think that we are meant to be separated like that. I think we are meant to align and co-create and have fun and create joy with each other. However, this was really interesting. So I went off to college and I studied political science because I was like, I want to go make the world a better place. Because when I was little, I was very concerned about the dolphins being caught in the dolphin nets off the coast of California. And so my mom at the age of 7 was like, this is what we do. We write our representatives. So in cursive, I wrote all my representatives in California. I wrote to my city officials. I wrote to the state. I wrote to the county. I wrote to them all. And I remember it distinctly and getting letters back. And then they had changed the laws so that dolphins, they had to change the netting laws and where they could fish and everything. And so I thought, I'm going to go study political science because I'm going to make the world a better place. That's what I was thinking. And then I went to my first poli-sci class. And I remember the professor saying this, and I was like, no. So he said, if you want to control a population that's over 150 people, you must use fear.
Bum, bum, bum.
Womp, womp. I was like, I don't align with that.
We love to highlight people and we love for them to come and share their stories with us. And so anyone who's been listening and they're like, oh my gosh, this lady knows so much about so much. I want to know more from her. How can they find you?
You can go to heal.me/Silva Method West. or you can go to silvamethodwest.com. So you can find me in both ways. If you want to book something with me, it's just heal.me/silvamethodwest or silvamethodwest.com. So I teach Silva Method. I teach a 4-day immersive. And then I also do a book club on Monday nights. And I love that because we dive into the book and then do meditations around it, because there's lots of exercises about how to flex the brain muscles. And so all of a sudden you can start creating things. You're like, I didn't know this was possible. It's really fun. I really like it. So I do that on Monday nights.
Wow, that's exciting. So everybody who's listening, Monday Night Book Club, you're going to be so bombarded with newcomers to your book club. How fun.
I love it. Well, and then also the first Wednesday of every month, I do a free meditation. So you can join, like I've literally had people from Europe come. And what I do is I basically survey everyone who's on, and I'm like, okay, what do you want to work on? And they give me, and so I tailor it to the people who come to the live meditation. And then a lot of people are like, I feel good. I'm like, that's the point.
My wondering is, as we're leaning into a new year and cycles and circuits are changing, all of the awesomeness and all of the transformation that you've been through in the last year, let alone lifetime, if you took a beat, if you took a moment and a breath, and we were meeting this time next year, what will be different in your life?
Oh, I think I'll have even more fun, to be honest, because I feel like it's like, when you finally are like, I'm in myself, I'm in my groove, I'm embodied, and you're creating fun and there's momentum. And I feel like this last year, I've dealt with some crazy that has been unpleasant, but then I've also had tools to be like, all right, it's here. Now it's over there. Bye. And you're moving forward. And then when you're creating with your mind that you're like, I'd like to manifest this, and it shows up and you're like, oh, thank you. More, please. So I see more of that happening. And then, excuse me, I've been asked to start writing down some of these things. So with the different tools that I use, specifically, I worked with someone who had depression their entire lives and anxiety. And she had heard about me, and it was like a friend of a friend gave her my number, and we did a session, and she was like, you just changed my world. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? She's like, I didn't even know these things were possible. I'm like, of course they are. Sorry, I breathed down the wrong way. And when you breathe down the wrong way, it's like, oh dear.
All good. Take your time.
So in that respect, I find that really fun, because now she can create something different. It's not so much I have these things and I can blame these things. It's actually, no, I am picking up on different people's energies. It doesn't mean I have to own it. It doesn't mean, not only do I not have to own it, I don't have to pick it up. I don't have to put it on as a backpack. I don't have to carry it around. I don't have to entertain it. I can just literally let down the backpack. Just let it all go. And that can be just as much as a kindness to you as Mother Earth. I mean, Mother Earth, she loves us. She's like, give me your crap. I'll compost it. I mean, and that's the best part, because if you've worked with Mother Earth on everything, my gosh, like, have you ever talked to land? Have you ever communed with land? It's like this deep love. And then by sending thankfulness and love and blessings back. And then if you're like, you know what? I got this dumpy burden. I'm going to just give it to you. And she's like, okay, I'll compost it. Here's some more positive, infinite love. Thanks so much. And it's just all these little things that just make life so much better.
Yummy, juicy living. I love it. Well, I can't wait to meet you next year. And obviously, hopefully way before then. And enjoy all of the baggage, garbage-free living and just oodles of fun. And yeah, blessings on your journey. I'm so grateful that you shared your enthusiasm. And I just have this image. My brain gives me amazing pictures. So I have this image of you on like this opera house stage kind of thing, in this beautiful kind of like a rosé kind of colored sparkly dress, and you're and you're just like singing this tone of like whatever that tone is, that is your joie de vivre. And the crowd is loving it. So I don't know, maybe you're going to go to the Met, but whatever
That
you
sounds
do,
so
it's
fun.
going to be gorgeous. So thank you for sharing your joie with us.
Well,
Yes,
thank you for
thank you
having
so
me.
much.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's been a blast. I'm like, it's so fun because it's like, hey, well, what else do you guys want to create? Let's do it.
Heck yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful, authentic and collaborative and unapologetically being who we all are being. And yeah, it's really great to be with inspiring people who know how to be themselves. So thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's like I said, I was so excited. I was like, oh, I love you guys. You guys are fun.
Thank you. Well, maybe we'll all meet on a stage together sometime and sing in some opera house and have to go buy sexy
I
underwear.
I love singing. Like it's one of the funnest things to do. So do you guys do your cars have names? So do you call your car Joy Guru?
Sometimes.
Okay. How about you, Michelle?
You know, I love my car. I've spent a lot of time in my car, and I've never considered naming it. That's so funny. So tell me more. Tell me what I got to do.
Well, I literally when I bought my car years ago, I sat in and I was like, "What's your name?" And I heard the name and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna call you George." And so George has been fantastic because George takes me from point A to point B. I talk to George. I do this thing called Marathon of Thankfulness. So when I'm driving in my car, I literally just start saying out loud all the things I'm thankful for. And it's this energy, not just of being thankful, but then also George is contributing. So I'm like, thank you so much, George, for keeping everyone at bay in their own lane. Thank you so much that it's clear and sunny. Thank you so much that we're in the fast lane. I like driving fast. And so it's this, it's fun because it's the support and contribution at the same time. And it's like, my gosh, I'm creating with my car. Like you can create with just about anything, and you can create goodness and kindness and fun and laughter.
That's
Well,
fantastic.
we're going to have more conversations because I think we can have a conversation about this crazy ass fear and how to counter that with the joy of your beautiful voice and so much more. So thank you.
Okay.
Have a beautiful
Bye.
day.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.